Have you ever imagined standing tall in a storm, completely still and unshaken by the roaring winds? Or waking up one morning finally free of that dull, persistent ache inside? Many of us yearn to be someone unbreakable, to feel nothing from criticism, rejection, betrayal, or loss. Maybe you've spent countless nights pretending to be fine on the outside, while silently begging your heart for a moment's rest. But what if the very efforts to be untouchable are actually keeping you trapped? In this video, we will explore the paradox of strength and suffering. We'll delve into why emotional pain often clings to us, how inner wounds color every hurtful word or betrayal we encounter, and why seeking rigid control over life can deepen our anguish rather than erase it. We will introduce psychological concepts like individuation and emotional clarity, drawing on the wisdom of thinkers such as Carl Jung, Viktor Frankl, Gabor Mate, and Eckhart Tolle. Along the way, we'll question societal pressures to bottle up our feelings and pretend to always be strong. Ultimately, you'll see that true resilience comes not from armor or indifference, but from knowing yourself fully, even the parts that hurt. As you listen, notice any familiar ache or frustration that stirs inside you. If something resonates with your experience, a memory, a thought, a knot in your chest, take a moment to acknowledge it. Consider commenting below once or at the end, "I choose awareness." This small act can be the first step toward a community of people tired of mere survival and ready to live with honest strength. In the next 28 minutes, we'll first unravel the illusion of control and how external triggers actually point to internal wounds. Then we'll dive into the unconscious mind, its hidden narratives and powers, showing how unseen forces drive our behavior. After that, we'll explore emotional integration as a source of inner strength, discussing the challenges, like self-sabotage and social conditioning, that arise when we face our pain. We'll widen our lens to see how individual healing fits into broader cultural trends of consciousness and awakening. Finally, we'll conclude by reaffirming that clarity and self-knowledge, not toughness or shielding, are our true emotional armor. Stay with us, and by the end you might view your pain and your inner journey with entirely new eyes. We live in a culture that prizes control and toughness. We tell ourselves that if we work harder, cover more bases, or become more resilient, we can avoid getting hurt. But experience shows that control is often an illusion, and chasing it can leave us exhausted. As one modern psychologist put it, people tend to attribute random outcomes like winning a lottery or getting lucky to their own skill or will, even when chance is at play. We do this not only with games of luck, but in relationships and life, believing that if we just say or do the right things, we can influence how others treat us or how events unfold. This illusion of control keeps us tied in knots, always on alert, always predicting or planning against disasters that cannot truly be prevented. Stoic philosophers pointed to this too. Epictetus reminded us that we cannot control external events, only our reactions to them. In Marcus Aurelius's words, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." But even with wise sayings, most of us still get caught up trying to steer the uncontrollable. We spend mental energy worrying about what coworkers think, what critics write, or whether friends will betray us, as if we hold the reins over their actions. In reality, as the psychology literature explains, this belief is a bias. We overestimate how much power we truly have. The result is chronic stress and rigidity. We tense up against life's uncertainties, wearing ourselves out. Ironically, the harder we grasp for control, the more we live in tension. Think of a rubber band. The more you pull it, the more energy is stored and the more likely it is to snap or fling out of your hand. When we grip at a fixed idea of how life should treat us, we become fragile. We might adopt an image of strength, a shield or armor, but underneath, we're wound tighter and more vulnerable. We see this every day. Someone trains to be emotionally tough, suppressing tears or anger, yet a single comment or slight mishap can cause an explosive reaction. Meanwhile, others who have faced true tragedy, loss of home, broken health, or grief might exhibit a calm resilience as if they've already reconciled with hardship. It's not that one is more broken and the other better. Rather, it's where the blow lands. As one modern perspective puts it, what hurts you is not what others do to you, it is what these experiences activate within you. Studies on emotional triggers confirm this. Our buttons get pushed because of wounds from our past. In fact, psychologists say our triggers, our buttons, are our wounds. A teenager yelled at by parents for being clumsy may grow into an adult who crumbles at any harsh criticism from a boss. Why? Because deep inside, those old feelings of shame or inadequacy were never fully healed. They're like a buried scab. Every time someone reopens it with a careless word, the pain flares up again. In this view, no insult or setback has power over you unless it touches an old hurt. Thus, the key isn't to control what happens to us, but to understand and heal the wounds that make events hurt. Of course, there's a countervailing message in society. Be tough, don't let anything get to you. From a young age, many are taught to bottle up feelings. Boys especially hear "don't cry, man up," and girls might learn that being too emotional is a weakness. Self-help memes promote stoicism and acrobatics of willpower. Yet research suggests this pressure to be happy or strong can backfire. One large international study found that when people feel a heavy social expectation to hide sadness and always appear happy, their mental well-being actually suffers. In other words, insisting on a facade of immunity can deepen our struggle. We end up living in a constant tension, perpetually predicting the unpredictable and resisting the inevitable. A recipe not for peace but for anxiety. So how do we stop the cycle? The answer is counterintuitive: less armor, more awareness. True freedom begins when we shift focus from controlling others or life to understanding ourselves. As one insightful line puts it, the actions of others have no power if they do not find an echo within you. Only what resonates with an unhealed part of you will hurt. If you deeply know your own triggers and wounds, you can see them coming. You'll still feel pain. None of this is about being numb, but you will not be knocked off balance by it. In essence, it's not what happens out there, but what happens in here, inside, that matters. This realization leads us naturally into the next inquiry: the unseen forces inside us, the unconscious mind, that orchestrate much of our suffering and our salvation. The next section will dive into that hidden realm, exploring how it shapes your life and how bringing it to light can liberate you. Imagine an iceberg. The tiny visible tip above water is all of our conscious mind, while the massive bulk below is the unconscious. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, described the psyche as a self-regulating system that seeks balance and growth, a process he called individuation. But much of that regulation happens out of sight, out of conscious awareness. Jung believed the unconscious contains a living constellation of memories, images, instincts, and complexes. And unless we shine light on these subterranean parts, they direct our life like invisible puppeteers. In Jung's metaphor, we can only hold a few things in awareness at once. Everything else is selectively excluded and sinks into the unconscious, building tension until it eventually breaks through in dreams, slips, or emotional outbursts. Freud had a similar picture. Contrary to the cold iceberg image, Freud insisted that the unconscious is not inert or dormant, but always on the move, constantly trying to express itself. He argued that even our most irrational-seeming behaviors have reasoning behind them, often rooted in repressed drives or past experiences. The unconscious Freud envisioned was active and dynamic, constantly trying to burst out, constantly being kept at bay by a kind of censorship, and constantly finding expression in distorted forms. In other words, the stuff we bury or ignore doesn't stay buried, it finds other ways to surface. These hidden processes can show up in many subtle ways. Perhaps you notice you become inexplicably anxious before a date, or angry after a friendly comment, or depressed for no clear reason. None of these are random, they are signals from the unconscious. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, observed that even in circumstances we cannot change, we always have control over our response. When we do not pay attention, the unconscious quietly writes scripts for us. It might amplify our inner child's fears or replay old stories from childhood. Eckhart Tolle captures this idea poetically. Relationships do not cause pain and unhappiness. They bring out the pain and unhappiness that is already in you. A lover's harsh word, a friend's unavailability, a colleague's snub, these events simply activate the emotional wounds already lying dormant inside us. Tolle warns that defining yourself by your pain only keeps you trapped. As he writes, as long as we define ourselves in terms of our pain and our problems, we will never be free from them. In plain terms, if you carry inside you an unconscious story, maybe I'm not enough or people will abandon me, then any situation that touches that narrative will trigger an intense reaction. The root issue isn't the other person, it's the inner imprint of past hurts. Even animals have unconscious drives. Humans have the added layer of meaning and language. Freud noted that from infancy, our experiences get bound to meanings and words by caregivers, and painful imprints can form that operate like wishful impulses seeking expression. Over the years, these impulses may be pushed out of sight, often because they are too painful or socially unacceptable to acknowledge. But suppression comes at a cost. As the modern psychoanalytic view emphasizes, everything we fail to consciously accept only grows stronger in the dark. Consider a common pattern. A person who grew up with an alcoholic parent might find themselves extremely sensitive to the smell of wine or a mention of binge drinking, even decades later. Or someone shamed for crying as a child might now work to avoid tears at all costs, building walls whenever sadness strikes. In each case, the unconscious equates a present cue, wine glass, tears with a buried trauma, abuse, shame, and triggers a surge of fear or panic. We might think we have left those old wounds behind, but until they are looked at and understood, they will control us from the shadows. Freud.org UK. Carl Jung put it powerfully, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This line, though widely attributed to him, captures his essence that we should not mistake compulsions and reactions for destiny. We should critically seek original sources for exact phrasing. The idea is clear. Most of what we call fate or bad luck is really just patterns we have inherited or locked away within. If you wake up day after day feeling drawn to the same unsuccessful relationships, or if anger seems to bubble out of nowhere at the slightest provocation, take heart that these are not signs of personal defect. They are signs that your unconscious is speaking to you, insisting that you pay attention to the story it's telling. So how do we converse with this shadowy part of ourselves? The first step is awareness. Notice recurring themes in your life. What's a grievance or guilt that you find yourself replaying? As Jung advised, we must know all the theories and masked, or all the techniques, but when touching a human soul, be just another human soul. In practice, this means practicing humility and curiosity toward your inner world. Pause when you react strongly. Ask yourself quietly, what is this really about? What unspoken memory or fear is being stirred? This is not easy. Our ego fights the investigation. For example, if someone criticizes us for being too sensitive, we may instinctively shut down or think, why should I even care what they think? But both reactions avoid the truth, that something inside still feels hurt by that comment. Instead, consider Frankl's words. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Maybe what needs to change is your understanding of why that criticism stings so much. Gabor Mate, a trauma expert, helps us reframe these experiences compassionately. He teaches that trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you. The event being criticized, abandoned, betrayed is one thing. The lasting injury is how you were affected. In his words, trauma is a psychic injury, lodged in our nervous system, mind, and body, lasting long past the originating incidents. This perspective tells us that healing comes from addressing the inner injury, not from blaming the outside world. By bringing unconscious material into consciousness, through reflection, therapy, meditation, or honest conversation, the old patterns gradually lose their grip. Thoughts that once unconsciously propelled you into repetitive behaviors become subjects of analysis and understanding. In Jungian terms, this is the work of integrating the shadow, acknowledging those hidden parts of ourselves. It is not about condemning ourselves for having darkness, it's about illuminating it so it can transform. Reflect, pause now even if for a minute. Think of a time in recent weeks when you felt unexpectedly hurt or angry. What exactly happened, and inside of you, what story was sparked? Perhaps it was a colleague's offhand remark or a family member's criticism. What old wound did it brush up against? This small act of noticing without judgment is the first step. Deep breath now, let's move into the next part. How we turn those revelations into resilience through emotional integration. You've been told since childhood, don't cry, don't complain, toughen up. In school, in family, in many cultures, suffering is coded as weakness, but this lesson is deceiving. Fear of feeling often leads us into a trap. We build walls and wear masks, but on the inside, those shards of pain keep bleeding. Our energy goes into keeping the lid on instead of processing what's inside. Psychological research shows that suppressing emotions doesn't make them disappear. It only pushes them deeper, where they can emerge as anxiety, depression, or even physical ailments. For example, one counseling clinic notes that continually bottling up uncomfortable feelings eventually takes its toll, manifesting as stress-related illnesses, increased aggression, or unhealthy behaviors. Simply put, what we refuse to feel will find a way to make itself felt. Imagine a pressure cooker. The more we keep emotions locked up, the more we build pressure inside. The lid might hold for a while, but eventually the steam will erupt, sometimes violently. This is why ignoring a blow to our pride can seem fine for now. Later, out of the blue, we might feel an urge to yell at a friend, or sink into a slump of despair, or even sabotage something good in our lives. All these are symptoms of unprocessed pain. Carl Jung offered a radically different view of suffering. He saw pain as the messenger of the soul. He famously said that if we turn away from suffering, it will only find more dangerous ways to get our attention. He even advised that if a wave of depression or anxiety comes, rather than dreading it, we should invite it and sit with it, listen to it. In modern terms, this means acknowledging pain instead of running. For instance, Eckhart Tolle describes pain as our greatest teacher. He points out that many people who endured limitations, failure, loss, or pain found that it turned out to be their greatest teacher. It taught them to let go of false self-images. It gave them depth, humility, and compassion. It made them more real. In other words, pain can be the catalyst that strips away our illusions and reveals our true nature. However, walking that path requires courage. The ego will put up a fight at every step. When you start to really feel a disappointment or grief, the first impulse is to suppress it. Distraction, scrolling mindlessly, numbing, a drink, an addictive behavior, rationalizing, or snapping at others. These are all attempts to avoid the discomfort of feeling. Yet every attempt to escape only prolongs the journey. Renowned trauma specialist Gabor Mate warns, the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. This idea appears throughout his work, even if an exact source citation is elusive. When we consistently run, the wound grows. The first time it's a dull ache, the next time it erupts as rage or collapse. Let's acknowledge some common challenges along this road. Self-sabotage, we often unconsciously reenact familiar dramas. If you grew up feeling unworthy, you might find yourself sabotaging good opportunities as if you don't deserve them. Or someone taught you love must hurt, so you keep choosing partners who will eventually disappoint you. These patterns feel like hidden enemies because they come from within, but they can be addressed only when they are seen. Repression and numbing, social norms and personal fears push us to hide certain feelings. We might believe anger is bad, shame is intolerable, or vulnerability is dangerous. So we either pretend we don't feel these things or distract ourselves whenever they emerge. Modern society demands, for example, that we never cry at work and that we smile through personal tragedies. This suppression can lead to emotional rigidity. We become so disconnected from parts of ourselves that we feel empty or a vague chronic malaise. Conformity pressures, we often wear masks to fit in. Perhaps you became a strong one, always fixing things for others, and now feel trapped in that role. Or you adopted a particular identity, successful professional, good friend, perfect parent, and shamed the parts of you that didn't match. Breaking away from these personas can feel terrifying. It's as if you might not be loved or accepted if people see the real you. Confronting each of these is like walking through fire. Trust that this alchemical process is actually purifying. Painful as it is, each confrontation shrinks the power of what was hidden. Paradoxically, it takes immense courage to face these truths, but it also bestows profound strength. Viktor Frankl's words resonate here. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. We may not be able to force others or life to be different, but we always have the choice to shift our own consciousness. Frankl adds another gem. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Even when everything's M's lost, this inner freedom to accept and grow remains. In practical terms, emotional integration often looks like this. You feel a pang of hurt or anger. Instead of pushing it away, you pause and ask, what is this telling me? You might journal, talk to a therapist or friend, meditate, or simply breathe through the sensation. Over time, the intense charge around that feeling diminishes. The same trigger may occur, but you have more choice in how to respond. The result of this work is often described as wholeness. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to become better in a moral sense, but to become whole, to embrace both our light and our dark sides in one conscious self. A simple example, once you've addressed deep loneliness and accepted it, a chance encounter with another lonely soul is no longer devastating. It's something you choose to engage with consciously, not a painful reminder of an unmet need. As one insight goes, true emotional immunity is not hardness, it is clarity. In other words, the absence of deception in ourselves and life builds a kind of armor, not cold and impenetrable, but clear and transparent. When you're clear about your patterns and needs, nobody can manipulate those needs. You see things as they are. Let us end this section with reflection. Think of a recent conflict or intense emotion you experienced. Write it down if that helps. Then ask, what fear or wound did this emotion touch? What did I learn about myself from that event? This practice of turning pain into insight is how the unconscious lightens its burden and how you build inner strength. Next, we'll broaden our view, how personal transformation ripples out into the world around us, and what this journey of clarity means for our society at large. As you've peeled back layers of your inner world, you may have noticed something else shifting, your place in your relationships and community. When we start living more honestly from our core, the surface-level connections we once took for granted might feel a bit strained. This isn't a sign of failure or social breakdown, quite the opposite. Carl Jung observed that individuation, becoming your true self, often requires shedding old roles and conventions. In his words, individuation is about unlearning what you think you are, tearing off the persona we created for others' approval. It's no wonder then that some friendships or groups we comfortably fit into before feel different now. You may have heard it described as a kind of cosmic alienation, but it's really just growth. For example, someone who never talked about emotions with a family of quiet achievers might start seeking deeper conversations and suddenly feel lonely in family gatherings. Or a person with a talent for empathy might no longer gel with competitive colleagues who insist on never showing weakness. In each case, distance grows not out of pride, but because you've outgrown the old environment. It can feel like a paradox. To find yourself, you sometimes must outgrow others. The transcript of this video even points out that this distancing isn't true rejection, but a natural part of maturation. You are not abandoning those people, you are simply walking a path a bit farther along. On a larger scale, many thinkers suggest that individual inner work is intertwined with cultural evolution. Psychologist Abraham Maslow and later transpersonal theorists talked about a collective awakening, the idea that as more people heal their inner wounds, the collective consciousness of humanity shifts. We see hints of this, rising global interest in mindfulness, therapy, and authenticity. Mindfulness and meditation are no longer fringe activities. Millions practice them for well-being. Even the wellness industry reports that consumers are prioritizing mental and emotional health more than ever. While market data can be superficial, it does reflect a deep craving in our times. We want meaning, presence, and inner peace. This broader movement can be seen as a kind of cultural individuation. Societies have their own shadows. For example, values like hyperproductivity or constant positivity can become collective neuroses. When individuals start questioning, why must we pretend everything is fine? Or what if failure isn't shameful? They contribute to a larger shift. The notion of wholeness can apply to communities. Integrating the collective shadow means acknowledging social pain, injustice, and fear, rather than pretending they don't exist. The road forward, both personally and collectively, requires what the philosopher Jordan Peterson calls the courage to tell the truth. It means living with awareness, even when it's uncomfortable. Each time you choose to understand your reaction instead of immediately blaming someone, you're practicing that courage. Each time you share honestly about your struggles, you give others permission to do the same. Philosopher and mythologist Joseph Campbell famously said, "We must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us." In our context, this can mean letting go of the fantasy of always being in control, the fantasy of being perfectly okay or perfectly fixed. In doing so, we step into the authentic life that calls us, one where vulnerabilities and strengths coexist. Across culture, people are increasingly realizing that there is no real strength in pretending. That trend shows up in art, literature, and even social movements encouraging vulnerability and openness. For instance, the popularity of movements like No More Secrets about mental health, or books like Glennon Doyle's Untamed, which urges women to abandon pleasing and listen to their inner voice, reflect this shift. Communities form around shared honesty, support groups, online circles, and even everyday conversations where saying "I'm not okay" is seen as brave, not shameful. All of this points to a hopeful vision, a world where people don't armor up against life but dive into it deeply and consciously. As one passage in the transcript suggests, the metaphor is living at depth rather than on the surface. Those who live on the surface can be knocked around by any wave. Those who dive know there is silence, stability, and power down below. In the depths, there is a kind of stillness where clarity lives. This doesn't mean retreating from society or becoming emotionless sages. It means bringing the fruits of your inner work into the world. When you interact from that deeper place of self-awareness, the way you relate to others transforms. You listen more, judge less. You respond to conflicts with understanding rather than reaction. In that way, your personal clarity becomes a gift to everyone around you. As we near the end of this journey, remember, real change is slow and ongoing. The awakening of consciousness is not a one-time event, it's a daily commitment. As Lao Tzu wisely noted, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. The same is true for personal growth. Each moment you choose awareness over reaction, you chip away at suffering and move closer to wholeness. In the next and final section, we'll bring these ideas home and reaffirm how clarity and self-knowledge become your true emotional shield. Now that we've journeyed together through pain, triggers, unconscious forces, and integration, let's pause and take stock. The path we've outlined is not easy, but it leads to a profound place, one where you stand strong not because you're insensitive, but because you're deeply aware. Key takeaways. External events only hurt if inner wounds exist. You are not weak for feeling pain, you're human. But remember Jung's insight: what we resist persists, and what we accept transforms, paraphrasing his idea of acceptance. The first step to freedom is to stop fighting your own feelings. Control is an illusion, awareness is power. No matter how hard we try, we cannot force the world to behave as we wish. Epictetus summed it up: we cannot control external events, but we can control our reactions to them. When you recognize your triggers, you'll see that others no longer hold the power to break you. Vulnerability is not defeat. A countercultural idea here: showing or feeling emotion is a strength, not a weakness. By moving through sorrow, anger, or fear, you gain wisdom and resilience. As Eckhart Tolle observed, many have discovered that pain became their greatest teacher. True armor is inner clarity. Think of emotional clarity as a deep calm at your center. You may still feel pain or disappointment when life strikes, but you remain grounded. You no longer drown in your sorrow or lose yourself in anger because you hold conscious presence in those moments. Self-knowledge is your compass. The more you know yourself, your stories, your patterns, your scars, the more choices you have. Viktor Frankl reminds us that our freedom is always in choosing our attitude. With insight, you can choose to respond rather than react automatically. To be explicit, nothing external will truly protect you if you stay unaware of your inner world. A hurtful word will continue to feel like a dagger until you understand what in you it's touching. A betrayal will continue to sting until you face the part of you that feared abandonment. This is why genuine transformation requires looking inward every single day. So here's the final thought I leave you with. Can you imagine meeting your own pain with compassion instead of resistance? What would it feel like to say to your wounded inner child, "I see you and I love you," rather than "I must ignore you"? The irony is that in doing so, you would emerge far stronger. Your clarity, born of honesty and acceptance, becomes an emotional shield that no storm can penetrate. If this video touched you, if something within has awakened, let us know. In the comments below, type "I choose awareness" and share one insight you gained. Also consider liking the video and subscribing to continue this journey with us. Your story could inspire someone else to face their own truths. Thank you for listening. Remember, life will not spare you from pain, but by embracing and understanding it, you will discover the unshakable strength that has been within you all along.